You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. My fascination wasn't with provenance or price tags, but with the tangible weight of time worn into wood and metal, the authentic scars left by vanished hands. It was a yearning for proximity to the past, something solid beneath my fingers. Cheap facsimiles littering weekend yard sales had lost their charm. I craved the genuine article. That pursuit led me, one unremarkable Saturday, to the echoing halls of an auction house. Dust motes danced in the sparse light, illuminating a procession of forgotten things. A skeletal grandfather clock whose pendulum hung frozen, a porcelain vase fractured like old ice, canvases smeared with forgotten landscapes that drew no bids. And then I saw it, leaning against a far wall, almost apologetic, away from the curated displays. The mirror, its frame, ebony dark and devoured by time, bore intricate carvings. Were they blossoms or something more serpentine, coiled along the wood, cracks spiderwebbed from the edges of the glass itself? It possessed no conventional prettiness, yet a strange resonance emanated from it, a discordant hum in the room's quiet symphony. That, I thought, a conviction settling deep within me, is unlike the rest. I will have it. A flick of my paddle, a swift, uncontested bid. It cost little. Gazes slid past it, indifferent. Securing its passage home proved an unexpected challenge, the object possessing a dead weight that defied its appearance. Auction attendants grunting helped maneuver it into my truck. I brought it back to the old house I'd inhabited for several years, a place of character and complaint, with its vast attic where floorboards groaned ancient secrets and shadows clung stubbornly to corners. The mirror, I decided, belonged there, at least for now. Space was scarce below, certainly, but a deeper reluctance kept it from my living areas. It felt attuned to the gloom, destined for a neglected recess. Alone in the house, wrestling it up the narrow side stairs leading directly to the attic became an ordeal. Even through gloves, the frame's texture felt peculiar, coated in a gritty film like desiccated secrets. Finally, propped against a dusty wall, I stood back, hands on hips, breath catching in the cool air. I tugged the chain for the single overhead bulb. Under its jaundiced glare, the mirror's age deepened, its flaws becoming stark pronouncements. Tiny black constellations bloomed where the silvering had surrendered to time. Shifting my weight, I saw my own face stare back, fragmented by these patches of void. Unsettling, yes, but easily dismissed. I descended, leaving it to the silence. Days dissolved into the rhythm of work, the mirror receding from conscious thought. The attic remained undisturbed until an evening errand sent me upward to retrieve dormant suitcases. I climbed the creaking stairs, switched on the light, and crossed the expanse of dusty floorboards. As I passed the mirror's station, a sibilance, faint as escaping breath, brushed past my ear. I froze. Instinct supplied rationalizations. A draft, mice skittering within the walls, the house's familiar time-worn chorus. But the sound had been too intimate, too near. It vanished the moment I stilled. My eyes scanned the dim space, lingering on the mirror. Stillness reigned. I deposited the luggage, cast one final, searching glance around, and turned towards the stairs. Reaching the threshold, I heard it again, a breathy hiss, undeniably close. A sharp turn revealed only my own reflection in the tarnished glass. Seen askew, my mirrored form seemed momentarily contorted, a trick of the dim light and my own rising disquiet. A knot tightened in my stomach. My pulse quickened. I waited, poised, listening. Silence answered. I left. That night, sleep was elusive. The conviction persisted. The whisper had originated from the mirror. Logic scoffed, yet the proximity haunted me. Old wood settles, houses breathe. I recited these truths like mantras. Still, passing the attic door, my gaze involuntarily lifted to the ceiling, half expecting that faint, insidious sound. My next ascent was in search of forgotten photo albums, nestled in a box somewhere in the attic's depths. A palpable chill greeted me upon entering, the air stagnant. The overhead bulb flickered, a nervous pulse in the gloom, fraying my already taut nerves. I navigated towards the far wall, the mirror lying along my path. As I drew level, the whisper returned, this time sharper, almost shaped, like the ghost of my name. Elias. A hard swallow, a glance at the glass. My reflection appeared ordinary, yet a tremor ran beneath my skin. The fine hairs on my arms lifted in salute to unseen dread. Ignoring it felt paramount. I seized the albums and retreated hastily. Descending the stairs, a prickling awareness crawled up the back of my neck, the distinct sensation of being watched. Closing the attic door behind me felt like sealing a tomb. I leaned against the hallway wall, breath ragged, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A dizzying wave washing over me. It's just an old mirror, I told myself, but the words rang hollow. Sleep offered no refuge in the following nights, only fractured narratives of reflections moving with alien autonomy, a disquieting dance of self and other. I'd wake slick with sweat, the specifics lost, but the unease lingering like a phantom limb. By the weekend, resolve hardened. This strangeness required confrontation. Armed with a heavy flashlight, a redundant comfort, as the overhead bulb functioned, albeit fitfully, I marched upstairs. The attic lay silent. The mirror stood sentinel. I planted myself before it, studying my reflection with forced scrutiny. My eyes, shadowed repositories of sleepless nights, stared back. My hair, unkempt, undeniably me, yet the unsettling impression of another presence gazing out from within the glass persisted. My pulse surged. My legs felt leaden. I shifted side to side, a nervous shuffle. The image mimicked faithfully. No lag, no distortion. Leaning closer until my breath fogged the cool glass, I examined the minute scratches marring the surface, the dull patina of the ancient varnish. I tapped the glass lightly with a knuckle. A flat, hollow sound answered. Then, a distinct groan of timber directly behind me. I whirled, flashlight beam slashing through the empty air. Nothing. Gritting my teeth, I spun back to the mirror. For an infinitesimal fraction of a second, or did I imagine it, the reflection seemed to turn slower, lagging behind my own movement. Too swift to grasp, yet the seed of doubt blossomed into cold certainty. My breath grew shallow, sweat trickled down my temple. I backed away slowly, resisting the primal urge to flee. Turning deliberately, I walked fast down the stairs, hands trembling so violently I had to clutch the railing for support. Subsequent ascents, when unavoidable, became fraught exercises in controlled panic. Whispers persisted, soft as moth wings against the ear. Peripheral shimmers flickered in the glass, shapes coalescing and dissolving at the edge of sight, never there when confronted directly. My heart would pound a frantic tattoo. I'd invariably retreat. The attic became a place to be circumvented, its threshold crossed only under duress. On night, returning late, exhaustion blurring my judgment, I decided on a foolhardy mission. Locate the source of the phantom drafts, find a rational explanation. Maybe proving it was nothing would quell the fear. Toolkit in hand, I climbed, each protesting creak amplified in the stillness. My legs felt weighted. Nudging the attic door open revealed near total darkness. The bulb was out. My flashlight beam cut a swathe through the gloom. Boxes, shrouded furniture, the mirror, all appeared undisturbed. I moved along the walls, probing for cracks, for gaps. The air was frigid, a faint current kissing my face, its origin elusive. Muttering about drafts, feeling increasingly foolish. Then I directed the light squarely at the mirror. My reflection swam into view, bleached by the intense beam. Something about the silhouette. Wrong. Lowering the flashlight, squinting through the dimness, the horrifying truth struck me. My reflection was adrift, dislocated. I took a deliberate step sideways. There was a horrifying pause, an extra beat, before the image sluggishly obeyed. My knees threatened to buckle, my chest constricted, tremors seized me. A step back, the reflection snapped into alignment, but the expression mirrored there. It was my face, yet the cast of its features felt subtly alien, mask-like. Breath hitched in my throat. I stood frozen, mouth parched, sweat beading on my brow. Escape beckoned, yet a morbid compulsion held me captive, watching, terrified to turn away, lest something happen in that unguarded moment. My flashlight flickered, sputtered. I smacked it against my palm. In the brief plunge into absolute darkness, a definitive whisper curled into my ear, clearer than ever before. Pure panic erupted. I spun, lunging for the door. As I reached it, a burst of icy air touched my neck, intimate as a breath. I slammed the attic door shut, the sound echoing, and fled downstairs, not stopping until I collapsed in the brightly lit living room. My heart felt bruised against my ribs. The whisper resonated, chillingly close, undeniably shaping my name. Elias. I huddled on the couch, enveloped in light, besieged by every creak and groan of the old house. For days, I lived as if the upper floor ceased to exist. Work, home, television, uneasy sleep in my bedroom. Sometimes with the light burning all night, the mirror infiltrated my dreams relentlessly. My reflection would gaze back, but its eyes held an alien sentience, ancient and knowing. Waking, gasping, drenched in sweat, I'd repeat the litany. Just a dream. But the terror felt bone deep, authentic. Last week, resolve flared anew. I refused to be a prisoner in my own home. A large, heavy sheet became my weapon. Covering the mirror, I reasoned, might staunch the strangeness, or at least spare me the sight of that increasingly disturbing reflection. Ignoring the tremor in my legs, I ascended once more. The attic air hung heavy. The bulb offered only a weak orange glow. I strode directly to the mirror, consciously tuning out a faint hiss that seemed to emanate from its direction. With a decisive flick of my wrists, the sheet unfurled, draping over the glass. I tucked the edges firmly around the frame. Stepping back, breathing hard, I surveyed my handiwork. No reflection, just a shapeless form swaddled in fabric. Relief, potent and immediate, washed over me. My heartbeat began to steady. "Done," I muttered, the word loud in the quiet. "That's it." I retreated downstairs. That night brought the first stretch of uninterrupted sleep in weeks. A single disturbance around 3 a.m. My name, seemingly called from a great distance, muffled, failed to fully rouse me. I drifted back to sleep. The following day held a fragile sense of normalcy. I watched a film without constantly glancing over my shoulder. Perhaps I allowed myself to hope the shroud was sufficient. Then, 2 nights ago, midnight silence shattered. A loud thump reverberated from the attic. I bolted upright in bed, heart leaping. Silence pressed in, then another thump, followed by a grating, scraping sound. Heavy weight dragged across protesting floorboards. Nausea churned in my stomach. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening. The noises ceased, replaced by a silence thick with implication. Flashlight clutched like a talisman, I crept upstairs, breath hitching, hands unsteady. Reaching the attic door, I eased it open. Darkness greeted me. The bulb remained extinguished. The flashlight beam swept the familiar chaos. Then it found the mirror. The sheet lay crumpled on the floorboards at its base, a pale accusation. The mirror itself was canted forward, impossibly shifted perhaps a foot from the wall, as if purposefully dragged. My mouth turned to dust. Tentatively, I stepped inside, beam trembling as it scanned the empty space. The air, cold and stale, offered no answers. It couldn't have slid, not on that rough wood, not with its sheer weight. As I knelt to retrieve the fallen sheet, the whisper returned, immediate, intimate, startling a small cry from my lips. I stumbled backward, colliding with a stack of boxes that tumbled with a clatter. Cursing under my breath, my gaze remained locked on the mirror. I centered the flashlight beam on the glass. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't right. It was slow. My reflection blinked a beat after I did. Panic seized my chest, cold and absolute. My eyes darted towards the stairs. Escape. But I couldn't tear my gaze away completely. I edged sideways along the wall, keeping the mirror in my peripheral vision. With each slight movement, the reflection's lag increased, fraction by agonizing fraction. By the time I reached the doorway, shaking uncontrollably, nearly dropping the light, the delay was undeniable. I risked a final glance as I turned, then plunged down the stairs, slamming the door, the echo swallowed by my own ragged breathing. I haven't been back up. Sleep comes in shallow, jittery bursts, every creak a potential footstep overhead. A permanent tightness constricts my chest whenever my thoughts drift towards the attic. The mirror remains there, uncovered, potent. It's the lag that haunts me most profoundly. That sense of dissociation, of something else piloting my image, testing its newfound freedom. I imagine it watching from the silvered depths, waiting. Last night I could have sworn I heard a low voice murmuring my name. What resides within that glass, and why it has fixed upon me, I cannot fathom. curses, hauntings. These were abstractions before. Now the abnormal is my reality. The situation feels untenable, yet paralysis holds me fast. Smashing it feels dangerous, courting unknown consequences. Retrieving it feels impossible. I feel cornered, besieged in my own home. The television flickers through the night, a low hum against the silence, a fragile bulwark against the whispers I strain not to hear. Each dawn feels like a temporary reprieve. I tell myself I must act, summon help, dispose of it, but the courage fails me. I wait, suspended in low-level dread, wondering what happens next, wondering what happens if my reflection, growing bolder with each passing night, decides it no longer wishes to remain behind the glass. The ancient timber groaned as Elias eased the door inward, the sound stretching down the vaulted central passage like a drawn-out sigh. No other voices disturbed the profound hush. No flicker of movement betrayed another soul's presence. Night held the library fast, long hours past the stroke of 12. A solitary lamp cast a wan circle of light upon the vacant front desk. He'd been granted leave to linger till dawn, the night watchman's gruff permission contingent on silence. Elias had nodded his assent. One particular codex beckoned, its reference cipher scribbled on a worn fragment of paper, tucked deep within his coat. He ventured down the first corridor, his steps measured, willing the floorboards beneath not to betray him with their inevitable creaks. The air hung thick, redolent of ages compressed into dust, the dry perfume of decaying paper, and the sharp tang of old varnish. Shelves of somber, near-black wood loomed on either side, disappearing into the upper dimness. Above, archaic light fixtures dripped a feeble, jaundiced illumination. Some bulbs pulsed erratically, threatening darkness. No music softened the stillness, no mechanical drone of climate control, only the faint, insistent beat of a hidden clock, measuring time somewhere beyond sight. His gaze scanned the labels affixed beside each towering rank until the sought-after number emerged. A finger, hesitant, traced the contours of leather-bound spines, many stripped bare of their protective jackets. Time had etched cracks into the leather. Some titles were lost to grime and wear. At last, he found it. The manuscript, swaddled in a cover of indeterminate, faded cloth. It felt desiccated beneath his touch, strangely abrasive. He bore his prize away from the shadowed stacks to a small reading table crowned by a diminutive lamp. The table listed, unsteady on the uneven floor. The manuscript caused it to rock gently as he set it down. He dragged out a heavy wooden chair, its feet scoring the floorboards with a raw, scraping protest. Carefully, he unveiled the manuscript. Its pages were brittle, yellowed like old teeth. He turned a leaf, then another, eyes narrowed against the dense, unfamiliar script. It was a calligraphy unlike any he knew, the letters coiled and resistant to understanding. As his fingers coaxed another page over, a sound surfaced, a smothered chuckle, brief and low. He looked up sharply, nothing but the silent sentinels of shelves, the ranks of sleeping books. He held his breath, listening. Silence answered, save for the distant clock's metronomic pulse and the low thrum of the aged lights. He bent again to the page, and again, the soft expulsion of mirth, seeming this time to emanate not from the vast room, but from the very fibers of the manuscript cradled before him. He leaned closer, straining to catch a breath. A footfall, only the clock, the buzz, the profound emptiness. A prickle of unease prompted him to turn, to survey the aisles behind him. Rows plunged into shadow, seemingly more numerous than before. He recalled perhaps 5, maybe 6 corridors branching from the main path. Now they appeared to multiply, 8, perhaps 10 deep. He took a hesitant step away from the table, his gaze snagging on the intricate grain of the floorboards. A wrongness settled over him. Glancing back toward where the entrance should be, he saw only more shelves, an impassable wall of wood and paper where open space had been moments ago. He paced a few steps in the direction he believed he'd come. The corridor itself seemed subtly altered, bent where it had been straight. The table now sat at an unfamiliar angle relative to his point of entry. He rubbed his eyes, blaming fatigue. Returning to the manuscript, he tugged the lamp nearer, its bulb humming a fragile tune. He turned another stiff page. A distinct, small laugh bubbled up from between the leaves. Gooseflesh pebbled his arms, his throat constricted. Gently, reverently, he closed the cloth cover and rose. A breath of air, a moment outside this cloying stillness. That was what he needed. He sought the entrance door. It had been behind him, surely no more than 20 paces. Now, only shelves met his gaze. He circled the table, stepped left, peered down an aisle. It stretched into a deeper darkness than seemed possible, swallowing the weak light. He tried another. More shelves. Endless. He pivoted slowly, a full rotation. No sign of the front desk, no hint of the heavy wooden door that had admitted him. His heart began a frantic cadence against his ribs. A film of sweat beaded on his forehead. He swallowed, the sound loud in the quiet. "Hello?" His own voice returned, warped by echoes. No answer. He cleared his throat, tried again, louder. "Is anyone here?" Silence pressed back, immense and indifferent. He strained his ears, a faint, dry scraping, like something sharp being dragged across wood. It ceased the instant he focused on it. He took a cautious step toward the vanished sound. The lights overhead flickered, casting erratic shadows. The scent of varnish, stronger now, stung his nostrils. No other light source penetrated the gloom. No windows, no glowing exit signs. Only these ancient lamps and the relentless geometry of shelves. He tried to reconstruct his path, straight from the entrance, locate the call number, retrieve the manuscript, sit at the table. Simple. Yet now the front desk, the very concept of an exit, had dissolved. He walked down an aisle, the shelves towering some 8 feet, crammed with volumes whose colors had long faded to muted earth tones. Each section mirrored the last. Dark wood, dull spines. Reaching the aisle's end, he turned right into another corridor. He hurried along it, desperate for a solid wall, a door, any boundary. Instead, the path curved, depositing him back near the table, the manuscript lying inert upon it. Circles. He was walking in circles. He snatched up the manuscript, clutching it to his chest. Perhaps returning it, placating whatever force resided here, would break the spell. He remembered the shelf, the label. He went to the spot. A different shelf stood there now, bearing unfamiliar books. He checked the next aisle and the one after. The original location had vanished. He held the manuscript tightly under his arm. The laughter within it had fallen silent, but its weight seemed to have increased, dense and significant. The lights gave another violent flicker. He felt a tremor through the floor, the deep groan of immense weight shifting. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw it. The shelves themselves were in motion. One unit slid ponderously, its base scarring the floorboards. Panic tightened its cold fist around his lungs. His breath came fast, shallow. His mouth was parchment dry. "Keep calm," he whispered internally, the words a frail charm against the unfolding impossibility. There was no logical reason for this, yet his eyes did not lie. The library was rearranging itself, the aisles reforming like pathways in a dream. He resolved to reach a wall, any perimeter. Surely the library had boundaries. He chose a corridor and walked straight, forcing himself not to turn. Time stretched. Still, only shelves flanked him. He stopped, resting a hand against a stack of books. The covers felt unnervingly cold. He pressed onward. Minutes crawled by. Finally, a corner, and in it, a door, narrow, with a small pane of frosted glass. He seized the handle, locked solid. He pushed, pulled, futile. He knocked. The sound was muffled, absorbed by the wood. Then the scraping sound returned, closer this time, just beyond the door. He pressed his ear to the cool glass. Utter silence from the other side. He wrestled with the handle again. Immovable. He turned back to the labyrinth. A long aisle stretched away, the lights humming their dissonant frequency. The air thickened with the smell of old polish. He walked slowly now, fatigue dragging at his legs. In the dim reflection of a fire extinguisher cabinet's glass, his face stared back, pale, slick with sweat. He felt the outline of the paper in his pocket, the forgotten reference number. Pointless now. With each step, the floor seemed to undulate slightly beneath his feet. A voice, thin as thread, whispered his name. Elias. He froze. He hadn't given his name. Not to the guard, not on any register. How? He scanned the towering shelves, the shadowed recesses. Empty. The voice, low and rasping, spoke his name once more, then faded. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice cracking. Only the library's heavy silence replied. He moved toward the source of the whisper. Another table materialized from the gloom, identical to the first but displaced. He looked down at his arm. Empty. The manuscript was gone. He hadn't consciously set it down. He spun around. There, on the table, lay the codex, inexplicably open. He approached it warily. The ink on the exposed page seemed faded, the script tight, slanted, impenetrable. He traced a line with his finger. The parchment felt strangely warm. Lifting his hand, he rubbed his thumb and forefinger together. A fine, dark dust remained. And then, the laughter again. A brief, stifled giggle. It echoed for a second, then died. With a choked cry, he slammed the cover shut, shoving the book away from him. The scraping erupted anew, louder, more insistent. Behind him, a massive shelf glided across the aisle, blocking his retreat, its passage scoring deep gouges in the wood. He lurched forward, only to see another shelf begin to move, closing off the path ahead. Trapped. To his left, a narrow gap remained. He squeezed through just as another unit ground into place behind him. He found himself in a small alcove, a reading nook furnished with a single armchair, a low table, and a lamp whose switch was jammed immovably in the on position. He touched the bulb instinctively. Searing heat. He snatched his hand back, rubbing it against his trousers. Slow, deep breaths. He fought for control. "Elias!" The voice again, from behind the shelves to his left. He stood, holding his breath, and crept towards it. Between two towering stacks, a figure took shape. Tall, slender, indistinct in the weak light. It seemed to observe him. Before he could speak, it melted back into the shadows. He rushed to the spot. No gap, no doorway, just solid shelves. "I just want to leave," he pleaded aloud, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry if I disturbed anything. I won't take the manuscript." No answer came, only the sound of nails, sharp and deliberate, scratching against the floorboards nearby. A tremor ran through him. He cast about for a weapon, anything. His hand closed around a heavy, leather-bound volume. He gripped it tightly, his palm slick with sweat. He moved like a hunter, or the hunted, staying low, peering around corners. Each attempt to find a logical path towards the remembered exit was thwarted by the groaning, shifting architecture. The lights flickered, casting monstrous dancing shadows. His sense of direction was utterly lost. He clung to small details. A tarnished brass plaque on one shelf end glimpsed earlier. He tried backtracking, moving opposite to his last direction. After several minutes of tense navigation, he reached a corner that felt different, a glass door bearing a sign obscured by grime. He reached for the handle. It felt loose. He pulled. The door swung inward, revealing a small, quiet office. He slipped inside. A simple wooden desk, a green-shaded reading lamp, a metal filing cabinet. Silence. He checked the drawers, empty, save for scattered paperclips and a dried-up pen. He lifted the receiver of the old telephone on the desk. Dead air. Behind the desk, a window, painted shut. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, peering out into absolute darkness. Vague shapes suggested trees, perhaps, but no moon, no streetlights broke the void. The window frame was thick, solid. He exited the office, stepping not back into the corner he'd left, but into yet another unfamiliar corridor. Here the shelves stood in disciplined straight lines, stretching towards a discernible end point in the distance. Hope surged anew. He walked quickly, his footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. The corridor opened into a space that tugged at his memory. Far ahead, a familiar beacon, the solitary lamp on the front desk. He broke into a run, shoes squeaking on the polished wood. The desk loomed closer, and behind it, blessedly, the silhouette of the main entrance door. He rushed forward, not daring to look back, the silence now feeling charged, watchful. No scraping, no laughter, no whispers pursued him. The great wooden door was closed, but a thin line of light shone beneath it. He grabbed the heavy brass handle, turned. It didn't budge, locked. He threw his shoulder against the wood. The frame shuddered, but held fast. He staggered back, panting. Then the voice, directly behind him, intimate and chilling. "Elias!" He spun around. 10 feet away, between the shelves, the blurred shape solidified slightly. Tall, gaunt, its head tilted as if in curiosity. He took a step towards it. It dissolved back into the shadows. "What do you want?" he yelled, the sound raw in his throat. No response. He scrubbed a hand over his face, teeth gritted. Turning back to the door, desperation lent him strength. He twisted the handle violently, yanked, heaved upwards. Nothing. He spotted a ponderous dictionary on a nearby shelf, dragged it free, and swung it hard against the brass handle. A clang echoed through the hall. The door seemed to give, just slightly. He tried the handle again. It turned a fraction more. He wedged his foot into the opening, prying, straining. An inch, then 2. He forced his shoulder into the gap, pushing with all his remaining strength until the opening was wide enough. He stumbled through into the main hallway of the building beyond the library. Here the lights burned steady and white. The floor was cool, tile, not wood. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant. He looked back. The library door stood closed. He tried the handle from this side. It was securely locked. Through the small glass panel, the interior looked utterly normal. Shelves stood in neat rows. The front desk lamp cast its quiet glow. Nothing moved. The lights were stable. No sound escaped. He walked down the long hallway towards the building's main entrance. The large glass doors at the end yielded easily. He pushed one open and stepped out into the cool, damp night air. The sky remained a starless expanse of deep gray. A car passed on the distant street, its sound mundane, reassuring. He stood for a long moment, drawing deep breaths, the ache settling into his muscles, his shirt clinging damply to his back. Elias. The name resonated in the quiet theater of his mind. He didn't understand. He didn't want to. He took a step away from the imposing facade of the building, then another, glancing back one last time. The old library stood silent, windows dark, the heavy wooden door impassive. Ordinary. Nothing stirred. He heard nothing. He turned away and walked, forcing one foot in front of the other, until he passed through the main gate and out onto the empty street. He did not look back again. A jolt flung Elias from slumber, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. On the worn, familiar landscape of the sofa cushion, his own hand trembled, an alien thing. Across the room, the television droned, some hushed salesman pitching miracles into the pre-dawn gloom. But the words blurred, meaningless. He pushed himself upright, slicking sweat from his brow. The air in the apartment felt wrong, viscous, heavy. A knot tightened deep in his gut, a nameless apprehension coiling there. He tried to dismiss it, this phantom unease, yet his gaze kept snagging on the sliver of darkness that was the hallway, the passage leading towards his bedroom. Then, a sound, faint, dry, like the stirring of brittle leaves or paper whispering secrets. Elias's pulse leapt. He rose, the floor cool beneath his bare feet, and drifted towards the disturbance, halting just outside his bedroom door. The susurrus emanated from within, near the antique dresser squatting beneath the window. Pushing the door inward, he fumbled for the light switch. Illumination flooded the space. The dresser remained as he'd left it, drawers shut tight, save for the top one, cracked open perhaps an inch. Another rustle breathed through the room. Pages turning, impossible. Nothing moved. Yet a clammy chill traced his arms, a shiver skating down his spine. Compulsion won over fear. His feet dragged across the rough weave of the carpet as he advanced. Hesitantly, his fingers closed around the cool metal pull of the top drawer. A pause, a held breath, then he tugged it open. The scent of aged textiles and dry wood wafted out. Beneath a haphazard pile of t-shirts lay an anomaly, a notebook, stark black cover, unadorned, utterly blank. He had no memory of it, none whatsoever. A wave of disorientation washed over him. Had he acquired it years ago, forgotten it entirely? No label, No inscription, nothing betrayed its origin. He riffled through the pages. Each one stared back, empty, pristine. Setting it atop the dresser, he simply looked at it, his mind a restless sea. Just a forgotten object, he told himself, nothing more. He slid the drawer closed, retrieved the notebook, and extinguished the light. Back in the living room's dim sanctuary, he placed the black book on the coffee table and sank onto the sofa, a dull ache beginning to bloom behind his eyes. He clicked off the television's murmuring voice. Silence settled, heavy and watchful. Sleep was a distant shore, his gaze returning again and again to the inert notebook on the table. Exhaustion eventually claimed him. Morning arrived with a crick in his neck and the stale taste of unease. Elias dressed, his eyes finding the notebook immediately. Still there, unmoved, untouched. He shrugged, a gesture that felt hollow, and went to brew coffee. Perhaps it could serve a purpose. He needed somewhere to corral ideas for a nascent project. Pen in hand, seated at the small kitchen table, he opened the black cover. The pen flowed effortlessly across the smooth paper as he sketched out a rough weekly schedule. A few lines scribbled, then he closed it. Nothing felt amiss. It was merely a notebook, solid and ordinary in his grasp. Later, a peculiar insistence tugged at him, an internal nudge. He found himself reaching for the notebook again. Flipping it open, his chest constricted. Where blankness had reigned, now pages teemed with script. A precise, almost archaic hand, utterly unfamiliar. His mouth went dry. These were not his thoughts, not his words. They spoke of locales he'd never encountered, places bearing strange, resonant names that felt alien on the tongue, labyrinths beneath forgotten cities, altars of cold stone, rituals cloaked in shadow. His mind spun as he turned page after page. Not random jottings, but intricate descriptions, hidden chambers, lightless corridors, instructions for ceremonies involving bizarre relics. His hands began to shake when one page detailed, with chilling accuracy, a fact about himself. A small, faded scar on his left shoulder, relic of a clumsy teenage accident. A detail he'd never shared, barely acknowledged himself. He felt suddenly lightheaded, his breath catching in his throat. A frantic scan of the room confirmed his solitude, yet the feeling of being watched intensified. His heart thudded, a frantic drum against his ribs. He couldn't tear his eyes from the script, the sharp, angular letters, the faded black ink that suggested a fountain pen long dry. A tingling numbness spread through his fingers. Snapping the notebook shut, he shot up from the chair, pacing the confines of the kitchen like a caged animal. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness, each second stretching into an eternity. Keys clenched in his fist, Elias fled the apartment, desperate for air, for space. He drove, directionless, the familiar streets blurring past his unfocused eyes. His head felt thick, heavy, his gaze darting nervously, half expecting shadowed forms to coalesce at the edge of his vision. He pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript coffee shop, seeking refuge in its mundane bustle. Black coffee ordered, he found a seat by the window, watching sunlight glint on the pavement, pedestrians drifting past. An island of normalcy in a sea of rising dread. But the images persisted. The notebook's descriptions of stone altars, robed figures chanting in darkness. Was this a breakdown? Had he somehow written these things himself? A nocturnal scribe possessed? The thought soured in his stomach. An hour bled away in the coffee shop's sterile comfort before he forced himself back towards the car, back towards the apartment. Climbing the stairs felt like ascending into a trap. He unlocked the door, stepped inside. A chill permeated the living room, a distinct drop in temperature. The notebook lay on the kitchen table, exactly where he'd left it. He approached it warily, a deep reluctance slowing his steps. Hesitating, he picked it up. More pages were filled. The same severe, meticulous hand. These entries spoke of creatures. Tall shadows with impossibly long limbs, dwellers of subterranean tunnels beneath aging structures. Sweat trickled down his neck. His pulse roared in his ears. He set the book down abruptly, backing away, eyes stinging. Clarity. He needed clarity. Tossing it away felt wrong, cowardly. He needed to understand. Retrieving the notebook, he carried it to the living room sofa, placing it on the coffee table before sinking into the yielding cushions. His leg jittered uncontrollably. He pulled out his phone, fingers fumbling as he typed search queries. Notebook writes itself, haunted journal, automatic writing. The results were useless. Fragments of fiction, outlandish conspiracy theories, nothing tangible. A flush crept up his neck. Rising, he walked to the window, staring down at the street below. Cars glided by. A man ambled along with his dog. Ordinary life unfolded, oblivious. Inside, his apartment felt like a cage slowly shrinking. The rest of the evening dissolved into restless pacing, punctuated by furtive glances at the silent, black-bound book. Should he read more? The references to himself? The impossible knowledge of his scar? What else did it contain? What else did it know? Exhaustion eventually gnawed through the anxiety. Around midnight, unable to bear its presence any longer, he carried the notebook back to the bedroom, tucked it deep within the dresser drawer, and slid it shut. He crawled into bed, mind churning, body leaden. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and uneasy. Hours later, a sound ripped him awake, the distinct, unmistakable whisper of turning pages. His blood ran cold. It was close, sharp in the stillness. Sitting bolt upright in bed, hands trembling violently, heart battering his chest, he fumbled for the bedside lamp. Warm light spilled across the room, illuminating the dresser. The top drawer stood slightly ajar, just as before. He stared, breath hitched, forcing himself to remain calm. His mouth felt like parchment. A profound weakness seeped into his limbs. He swung his legs out of bed, the floorboards groaning under his weight as he approached the dresser. Pulling the drawer fully open, he saw it. The notebook lay within, its pages fluttering rhythmically, turning as if stirred by an unseen hand. No draft, no breeze. His knees threatened to buckle. He snatched the notebook. Instantly, the rustling ceased. The ensuing silence roared in his ears. Clutching the book, Elias fled the bedroom, dropping it onto the coffee table as if it burned him. He paced the living room, rubbing the back of his neck, his skin prickling with a feverish anxiety. He couldn't bring himself to open it again. Not yet. Sinking onto the sofa, head in his hands, he focused on slowing his frantic breathing, quieting the frantic monologue in his head. After long minutes, he rose, locked the bedroom door firmly, retrieved a spare blanket, and resigned himself to the couch. Sleep was a tattered rag, offering little respite. Dawn arrived, grey and unwelcoming. His eyes felt gritty, his neck stiff. The notebook sat on the table, a silent accusation. He had to know. Had more appeared? Gingerly, he opened it. Yes, more pages filled. They spoke of a place called the Red Mill, an abandoned structure on the outskirts of town. He'd heard the name, vaguely recalled local whispers about its closure years ago. The notebook instructed him, Elias, to drive there. Tonight, it mentioned a hidden basement entrance, a ritual chamber marked with strange sigils etched into the floor. It promised something important awaited him there. A cold prickling crawled across his scalp as he read. His stomach twisted, yet beneath the fear, an undeniable current pulled at him, an urge to obey. He tried to fight it, pacing the apartment, fingers snapping nervously. The walls seemed to close in. There was nowhere else to turn, no other explanation. His thoughts circled obsessively around the Red Mill. Checking the time, he made a bargain with himself. Just drive by, look from the road, nothing more. He grabbed his jacket, phone, keys, leaving the notebook behind on the table, and walked out into the uncertain day. The drive felt unnaturally long, the miles stretching under a sky bruised with clouds. Finally, the silhouette of the Red Mill emerged at the end of a neglected gravel track. 2 stories tall, its paint faded to a ghostly memory of red, windows blindly boarded. Tall, dry grass whispered around its foundation. Elias parked on the shoulder, the engine ticking cool. His throat felt tight. The place radiated desolation. Stepping out, a cool wind brushed his face. Gravel crunched beneath his shoes. He scanned the surroundings, empty, silent. He edged closer. The boards on the windows were decaying. The main door sagged open on rusted hinges. Peering inside, dust motes danced in the weak shafts of light piercing the gloom. The air hung stale, heavy. Broken timbers littered the warped floor. He listened, straining against the silence. Slowly, cautiously, he moved through the cavernous main room, stepping over debris. His skin crawled. The building felt poised, expectant. The only sound was the low moan of wind finding cracks in the walls. In a far corner, he saw it, a staircase descending into darkness. At its foot, a heavy wooden door secured by a thick, rusty padlock. His heart gave a heavy thud. A hidden basement. The notebook's words echoed. He descended the creaking steps, his hand trembling as he reached for the padlock. It was old, solid. Glancing around, he spotted a length of rusted metal, a crowbar, half buried in the detritus. Palms slick with sweat, he wedged the tip against the lock's shackle and threw his weight into it. Metal groaned, resisted, then gave way with a sharp, percussive snap that reverberated in the enclosed space. His heart hammered. He pulled the heavy door open. A wave of damp, earthy mold assaulted his senses, making him cough, instinctively covering his nose and mouth. He fumbled for his phone, activating its flashlight. The beam cut a narrow swathe through the oppressive darkness, revealing a cramped corridor with weeping walls and an uneven concrete floor. He took hesitant steps forward, chest tight, mouth parched. The light found an archway further down, opening into a larger space. He advanced, stomach churning. It was a circular room, and the walls, they were covered in carvings. Intricate alien markings snaked across the damp stone, lines forming bizarre, interlocking patterns, just as the notebook had described. In the center stood a low, smooth stone platform, its surface strangely polished. He swept the flashlight beam around, probing the corners, the oppressive weight of the air pressing on his eardrums. Nothing else, just the sigils and the platform. A primal urge to flee warred with a morbid curiosity that rooted him to the spot. His heart pounded so violently it ached. Then he heard it, the dry papery rustle of turning pages, echoing unnervingly in the subterranean dampness. He spun around, flashlight beam slashing wildly. Empty. No one. The sound persisted for several seconds, then abruptly stopped. A violent tremor shook his body. The notebook was miles away on his coffee table, yet the sound had been undeniably real. His breathing grew ragged, sweat stinging his eyes. He backed towards the archway, desperate for escape. Suddenly, footsteps sounded from directly above him. Slow, deliberate treads crossing the floor of the mill's main level. He froze, every muscle tensed. One person? More? Impossible to tell. His heart felt like it would burst. He swung the flashlight beam towards the stairs, expecting a figure to emerge from the gloom. But the footsteps faded into silence, leaving a void more terrifying than the sound itself. He retreated further, light fixed on the corridor. The urge to run became overwhelming. He bolted, through the archway, up the groaning stairs, back into the dusty expanse of the main floor. Empty. Vacant. Pulse thundering in his ears, he sprinted out of the decaying structure, across the gravel, fumbling with his car door. He locked himself inside, sucking in deep, shuddering breaths, hands shaking too badly to immediately grip the steering wheel. Finally, the engine caught. He reversed violently onto the road, gravel spitting, leaving the red mill shrinking in his rearview mirror. A gnawing sense persisted, something incomplete, unfinished. The notebook promised he'd find something important. Had he missed it, or was this just the beginning? His stomach roiled as it drove towards the city, the setting sun bleeding orange and purple across the horizon. His phone buzzed, a friend wanting to meet up. He ignored it. His world had shrunk to the size of a black notebook and the dread it inspired. Back at his building, he hesitated outside his apartment door before unlocking it and stepping inside. The coffee table was bare. His chest tightened into a knot of pure fear. A frantic search of the living room, the kitchen. Nothing. It was gone. Scalp tingling, he moved towards the bedroom. He pushed the door open, flicked on the light. The top dresser drawer was open, and nestled inside, angled slightly towards him, as if in greeting, sat the notebook. He stared, unable to move closer, breath coming in shallow, rapid gasps. His forehead felt clammy. Swallowing hard against the obstruction in his throat, he forced himself forward and picked it up. The cover felt unnaturally cold beneath his fingers. It fell open easily, revealing a fresh entry. Progress has been made, the precise script declared. You are ready for the next stage. It hinted at other locations, further rituals, more cryptic instructions tailored just for him. His vision swam, his throat constricted. He closed the book, setting it carefully back down. What now? He stood motionless in the sudden, profound quiet, the only sound the frantic buzzing in his own ears. Now, darkness brings the sound. Every night as Elias lies rigidly on the sofa, the bedroom door shut tight, he hears it, the soft, insistent whisper of turning pages from beyond the locked door. He wakes each morning to find new entries, each more elaborate, more disturbing than the last. They speak of impossible geographies, tunnels burrowing beneath the city, forgotten artifacts slumbering in deserted buildings, and the intricate steps he must take to reach some obscure, terrifying apotheosis. They speak, too, of him, dissecting his deepest fears, laying bare secrets he thought buried forever. He tells himself it's delusion, stress, a fracturing mind. But the ink is real, the words are real, and the compulsion, the insidious pull to follow these directives, grows stronger with each passing day, even as his body trembles at the thought. He doesn't know the destination, he only knows the journey has claimed him, that he's caught in a current too strong to resist. The pages turn in the night, the instructions appear with the dawn. Each day a new piece clicks into place in a puzzle he never asked to solve. Each day he steps deeper into a shadow-drenched landscape he desperately wants to escape, uncertain how much of Elia is even left to make the choice. The terminal hummed, a low, fluorescent thrum beneath the weight of the hour. Midnight had bled into the anonymous hours beyond, leaving the air thick with stale oxygen and the collective exhaustion of delayed travelers. We were ghosts haunting the uncomfortable chairs, adrift in that liminal space between departure and arrival. Fatigue had settled over me like fine dust, yet a stubborn spark of awareness remained, scanning the sparsely populated rows. It caught on him, a man, perhaps mid-40s, tracing a restless path a few aisles away, his movements tight, almost caged. He wore the map of long roads on his face, a weariness that mirrored my own. Eventually, his pacing ceased. He sank into the plastic shell of a seat directly opposite mine, offering a smile that barely disturbed the lines of fatigue around his mouth. A curt nod was my reply. Airport encounters were a dime a dozen, fleeting oddities rarely worth remembering. He seemed unremarkable, another soul caught in the same purgatorial delay. When his voice, surprisingly soft, inquired if the adjacent seat was taken, a shrug was my answer. Be my guest. Proximity wasn't a concern in the echoing emptiness. He introduced himself as Arthur. I murmured my own name, Elara, the syllables barely registering even to myself. Conversation spooled out, thin and obligatory. Where was I bound? Home, I offered. He nodded, mentioning some indistinct town, a name that dissolved as soon as it was spoken. His questions persisted, a gentle but steady stream, lapping just beyond the shores of casual indifference. Passing the time, I reasoned, same as me. My replies grew clipped, hoping brevity might signal disinterest, but he navigated around my defenses, his curiosity undeterred. He began to paint strokes of his own life, a long hauler, perpetually nomadic, the highway his only constant. Children existed, he mentioned vaguely, specters who no longer materialized in his calls. Loneliness emanated from him, a palpable chill. A sliver of empathy wedged itself in my unease. I let him speak, a passive audience to his solitary narrative. Then the current shifted. The questions veered, becoming pointed, specific. My daily rhythms, the shape of my family, the precise location I called home, details irrelevant to this transient non-relationship. I attempted redirection, nudging the dialogue back to neutral ground, but he circled relentlessly, his gaze fixed, dissecting each flicker of expression on my face. Discomfort began to coil in my gut. A cold serpent. Just a lonely man, I told myself, perhaps lacking social grace. Nothing more. Salvation arrived via the tinny voice of the PA system. Our flight finally was boarding. Relief washed through me, swift and cleansing. I rose, murmuring an excuse about gathering my belongings, a clear signal for separation. But he rose too, a shadow detaching itself from the periphery, settling unnervingly close as I angled toward the forming queue. A backward glance confirmed it. He was right there, his presence a heavy weight at my shoulder blades. Coincidence, I insisted silently. Sheer eagerness to escape this holding pattern. Yet he didn't drift back into the anonymity of the crowd. At the gate desk, the attendant requested my boarding pass. As I extended it, acutely aware of him beside me, trying to project utter dissociation, he stepped forward. His voice, level and serious, addressed the attendant. "I'm with her," he stated. "We're traveling together." The floor seemed to vanish beneath me. I turned, mouth agape, searching for words. But he pressed on, weaving a fiction of shared seats, of established companionship. The attendant's eyes flickered between us, caught in the sudden, unexpected dissonance. "No," I finally choked out, the word thin and reedy. "No, we're not. I don't know him." A frown creased the attendant's brow as Arthur calmly persisted, his demeanor practiced, almost serene. My heart hammered against my ribs. Blood roared in my ears. Security. The word formed in my mind just as he abruptly yielded. "All right," he conceded, his voice suddenly glacial, tinged with an unfathomable disappointment. "If that's how you want it." He pivoted and melted back into the thinning cluster of passengers. A shaky wave of reprieve hit me, but the chilling certainty that his eyes remained fixed on me lingered. I boarded, finding my seat, forcing deep breaths, trying to relegate him to the category of random creep, an unsettling anecdote. Then, buckling myself in, my gaze drifted down the aisle. There he stood, framed in the aircraft's entrance, deep in conversation with a flight attendant. The distance muted his words, but his head tilted slightly, his eyes finding mine unerringly down the length of the cabin. I shrank into my seat, a silent plea for him to simply vanish. He didn't approach. After a moment, the flight attendants shook their heads firmly, a silent refusal. He was forced to retreat. But the look he cast back towards me as he left the doorway was an imprint burned onto my awareness, cold, furious, as if I had committed some profound betrayal. Upon landing, I retrieved my bag with frantic haste, nearly sprinting through the arrival hall, each footfall echoing my urgency. My head swiveled constantly, scanning faces, expecting his familiar form to materialize from the throng, feeling the phantom pressure of his stare. He wasn't there, just a disturbing encounter, I told myself repeatedly, a socially inept man misreading signals. I tried to file it away, yet the unease never fully dissipated. For weeks, stepping into any public space triggered a reflexive scan, a search for that particular intensity in a stranger's gaze. Months have passed, but sometimes, in the quiet vulnerability of late night, I feel it again, that cold, unwavering stare, a specter hovering just beyond sight, waiting. And a chilling question surfaces. Will he be there next time, at another gate, ready to resume his narrative? Sunlight, thin and golden, draped the stone cottage. its thatched crown seeming to beckon us toward the idyllic rural tableau we'd chased for years. Yet, as my fingers wrestled with the antique brass key, a current of ice snaked through me. An undeniable conviction settled. Unseen eyes watched from the diamond-paned gloom within. "Papa, hurry! My room!" Willow, my daughter, vibrated with impatience, her small hand tugging my coat, a brief spark against my burgeoning dread. I manufactured a smile, the lock finally yielding with a reluctant groan. A wave of scent, stale air, dormant wood, the very breath of long disuse, washed over us. Clara, my wife, crinkled her nose, though her voice bloomed with forced brightness. "A proper airing is all it needs, surely." I nodded, attempting to mirror her hope. We'd poured our savings, our future, into this escape from the city's clamor, this sanctuary for Willow's childhood. This was meant to be the beginning. That inaugural evening, however, the cottage's ancient bones complained, a symphony of creaks, groans, and sighs that frayed my already taut nerves. Just the house settling, I insisted silently, the normal protestations of venerable timbers. But then, a sharp bang echoed from upstairs, a door slamming shut with violent finality, while the three of us stood clustered in the kitchen. Logic offered no solace. "I'll just see," I offered, striving to leash the tremor in my voice. Clara's gaze held a flicker of worry, but she remained silent. Ascending the constricted staircase felt like climbing into a throat of shadows. The dying light scarcely pierced the grimy panes above. I crept along the narrow landing, fingertips brushing the coarse, uneven plaster. The door to Willow's intended room hung partially open. I nudged it wider. Empty, just the bare floorboards and fading light we'd left behind. But as I turned, a detail arrested me. There, stark against the thick dust layering the window ledge, rested a single, immaculate handprint, impossibly small, belonging to no child we knew. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs. I retreated, backing down the hallway, descending quickly. I kept the discovery locked behind my teeth, unwilling to poison their first night with fear. There had to be some mundane explanation. Later, cocooned in the complaining embrace of our bed, the nocturnal chorus of the countryside a strange lullaby, Clara whispered, "Elias, did we do the right thing coming here?" I drew her near, the familiar fragrance of her hair, a small anchor. "We did," I murmured, the conviction hollow, even as I spoke. "It just needs adjusting to." The words had barely dissolved into the darkness when a protracted, low moan resonated through the very structure around us. We both jolted upright, ears straining against the sudden silence that followed. "What was that?" Clara's voice was a thread of sound. "The wind, likely," I lied, tasting the falsehood. Old places like this have their own language. Sleep eventually claimed us, though it was a thin, troubled veil. My dreams were haunted landscapes, populated by indistinct shapes, flitting at the edge of vision, by sibilant whispers in tongues I couldn't grasp. Morning found us frayed, exhausted, attempting the choreography of settling in. Willow, blessedly, seemed immune to the undercurrent of tension, charting the cottage's eccentricities with gleeful curiosity. It was amidst the cardboard labyrinth of unpacked boxes in the living room that I first registered the scratching, faint, insistent, emanating from within the walls. Mice, I reasoned initially, an expected rural companion. Yet as the hours bled away, the sound intensified, grew bolder, almost purposeful. It seemed to shadow our movements, a frantic scrabbling always just beyond the plaster. Clara heard it too. Her eyes widened when a particularly loud flurry erupted from behind the stone hearth. "Perhaps we should find an exterminator," she proposed, her voice stretched taut over a well of anxiety. I seized the offered normalcy. "I'll look one up." But my mobile displayed only stark emptiness, no signal. The newly installed landline offered nothing but a hiss of static. We were adrift, severed. Nightfall ushered in a new, terrifying phase. Willow's scream ripped through the quiet dark, sharp and piercing. We scrambled to her room, finding her bolt upright in bed, eyes vast with terror. "A lady!" she wept, collapsing into Clara's embrace. "She wore old clothes, standing right there, watching." My frantic search yielded nothing. No forced entry, no trace. Turning back to my sobbing child, my foot nudged something small on the rug. A doll, diminutive and strangely archaic, lay where I swore nothing had been when we tucked her in hours before. The following day dissolved into a cascade of the inexplicable. Books tumbled from shelves untouched. Pockets of unnatural cold materialized, our breath pluming in sunlit rooms, and persistently, relentlessly, the sensation of being observed. Clara and I clung to rationalizations, desperate threads of logic. But finding Willow in the kitchen, chattering animatedly to an empty corner, describing with startling clarity a little boy neither of us could perceive, that shattered our denial. "We need help, Elias," Clara stated, her voice trembling. "This isn't right. None of it." I could only agree. But the phones remained dead conduits, and the car, inexplicably, refused to start, its engine stubbornly silent. Miles stretched between us and the nearest neighbor, the thought of traversing those deserted lanes as dusk bled into night, filling me with a primal dread. As true darkness descended, the house seemed to awaken fully. Objects launched themselves across rooms, disembodied voices whispered from vacant corners. The scratching within the walls escalated to a frenzy, as if something immense fought for release. We huddled in the living room, a tight knot of fear, startled by every settling groan, every shifting shadow. Willow, spent from crying, had finally succumbed to exhausted sleep on the sofa between us. "What do we do?" Clara's voice was raw, her eyes shadowed with tears. I opened my mouth, searching for comfort I didn't possess, when, in perfect unison, every light in the cottage extinguished, plunged into absolute blackness. The ensuing silence was profound, suffocating. Even the incessant scratching had ceased. A fragile tendril of hope unfurled. Perhaps it was over. Then, from the floor above, it began. Slow, ponderous footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. Methodically moving, room by room, drawing nearer. Clara's fingers dug into my arm, her rapid, shallow breaths, audible in the stillness. I felt the tremor that shook her frame. flight screamed through my veins. Grab Willow, break for the door, run. But terror held me fast, a leaden paralysis. The footsteps reached the stairwell's summit. Thump, thump, thump. Descending now, deliberate, measured, the old treads groaning beneath an invisible burden. My voice, when I finally unearthed it, was a pathetic, wavering thing. "Who's there?" A pause. Silence stretched, taut as wire. Then, a voice slithered from the enveloping dark. Ancient, fractured, steeped in venom. "This is our home," it rasped, "and you are not welcome." The declaration unleashed a torrent of whispers, dozens, perhaps hundreds, swirling around us, echoing the sentiment, weaving a chilling tapestry of sound. Not welcome, not welcome, not welcome. Willow awoke with a strangled cry, her terror adding to the spectral chorus. Furniture began to shudder violently. Pictures rained from the walls. A wind, born of no earthly storm, howled through the room, glacial and thick with the stench of rot. In that maelstrom of pure horror, the paralysis shattered. I snatched Willow into my arms, seized Clara's hand, and bolted for the door. We burst into the cool reprieve of the night, running blindly until the cottage was a dark shape against the horizon. Gasping, hearts hammering, I risked a backward glance. It stood silent, lightless, deceptively tranquil, but framed in an upper window, a silhouette took form. A woman in antiquated dress, her face contorted into a truly malevolent grin. As I watched, transfixed, she lifted a hand in a slow, mocking wave. Then she dissolved, leaving only empty glass. We never retrieved our belongings. We walked through the starless night until dawn, revealed the first houses of a distant town. Days passed before the words could form, before we dared dissect the nightmare we had somehow survived. We abandoned the cottage to its history, to the horrors nested within its charming facade. Yet sometimes, when the world sleeps, the whispers return, faint but distinct. The feeling of unseen eyes persists, a cold pressure in the shadows, and the question lingers: did we truly escape, or did we leave fragments of ourselves behind, perpetual, unwelcome guests in a house that wasn't ours? The disquiet began subtly 2 months back, upon settling into this edifice of bygone years. Its heart, the elevator, pulsed with an unnerving antiquity from our first encounter. Corroded metal doors shuddered closed with a rattling sigh. The ceiling lamp cast a nervous, stuttering light, and the mirrored panels lining the cabin walls were filmed with decades, scratched and dim, possessing a peculiar, bruised tint. Not merely soiled, I soon grasped, but stained intrinsically by time itself. A dark, vitreous quality that pricked at my unease. Whenever the later hour necessitated my entry into its cramped confines, an atmospheric shift occurred. Not a draft, not the whisper of moving air, but something more profound, as if the very space within the car inhaled sharply, holding its breath. I fought the perception, yet persistently, a nebulous outline materialized beside my own reflection in those tarnished mirrors. It mimicked neither my form nor my posture, hovering slightly askew, an untethered umbra. Details remained elusive. only a shape defined against the dim glass. It dissolved the instant the doors ground open. A trick of the fatigued eye, I insisted. A phantom born of weary light. My profession keeps me tethered to the desk until the deepest hours. Midnight, often later, marks my return. The ritual commenced in the deserted lobby. Summoning the lift, observing the archaic floor indicator above the doors, pulse erratically, then stepping into the waiting maw. The cables invariably groaned their ancient protest. The overhead bulb hummed a low, insistent frequency. Exhaustion would press me back against the cool wall panels. Routinely, somewhere near the fourth floor's ascent, the mirrors would betray it, that supplementary darkness. It possessed little animation, yet with each floor climbed, it seemed to subtly encroach, drawing fractionally nearer. By the seventh, it felt adjacent, a breath away from my shoulder. Then the doors would slide apart on my level, I'd exit, and the shape would cease to exist. Silence became my confidant. Admitting this spectral companionship felt ludicrous, destined for mockery. Certainty eluded me. Evidence was non-existent. Imagination, I pleaded inwardly, spurred by the relentless pressure of deadlines, the screen-scorched ache behind my eyes, the throb in my temples. Hallucinations? Retinal ghosts? Yet on certain nights, its presence solidified, grew substantial. A distinct coolness would bloom along my left side. The fine hairs on my arms would stir, goose flesh prickling my skin. No discernible airflow existed within that sealed box, yet the chill was undeniable. A knot of dread began tightening in my stomach each time my finger approached the lobby call button. The 12 flights of stairs beckoned occasionally, a daunting alternative. After a draining day, that climb felt a more concrete torment than the ephemeral mirror shade. So the elevator remained my reluctant passage. I attempted aversion, fixing my gaze downwards, but this only amplified the tension. Peripheral vision registered flickers, shifts. My pulse would accelerate, breath catching shallowly in my throat. One particular night bled into morning. 2:00 a.m. found the lobby utterly void, the security station vacant. I pressed the button. A faint subterranean rumble answered as the cage descended. When the doors parted, the chill met me instantly, tangible. The air hung thick, stale with the scent of aged metal and something akin to damp, forgotten fabric. I selected 12. The doors sealed, the light above spasmed twice, and the ascent began. I stared resolutely at the floor, denying the mirrors my attention, yet the sensation of something behind me was electric. My scalp tingled, my stomach constricted. By the fourth floor, the familiar presence manifested to my left. A reluctant glance upward confirmed it. My own reflection stared back, slumped with weariness, and beside it, the faint silhouette. No features, just a deeper darkness carved against the dim mirror. It was close enough now, surely, to graze my shoulder. I swallowed against a dry throat, forcing calm. Just the play of light, I repeated, a silent mantra. At the 6th floor, the shadow seemed to glide, drawing nearer still. I held my breath. Sweat slicked my palms as I focused intently on the illuminated numerals tracking our progress. 7th floor. Now I could almost feel a pressure against my side, an invisible weight. My back muscles clenched, the hairs on my nape prickled. The elevator's momentum slowed marginally, but no summons came, no waiting passenger. I exhaled, my gaze fixed on the doors, willing them toward 12. Instead, the elevator jolted, stopped, 8th floor. Confusion warred with rising fear. I hadn't pressed 8. No one else could have. The doors remained sealed. The overhead light began a frantic, aggressive flickering. In the mirror, my reflection seemed to ripple, my face unnervingly pale. My gaze was inexorably drawn to the other shape. It was no longer just a silhouette, outlines sharpened, shoulders, arms, the distinct shape of a head. A fierce pounding commenced in my chest, a spike of pure terror driving down my spine. My finger fumbled for the door open button, pressed it, nothing, jabbed it again, harder. The doors stayed stubbornly shut, the lights flickering intensified, each pulse altering the reflection. Now a figure solidified, a man, seemingly, draped in a ravaged suit. Fabric hung torn at the shoulders, his tie was shredded. His face, starkly pale, bore deep hollows around the eyes. Disheveled hair framed his features. He stared directly at me, a half smile playing on his lips that constricted my throat. I scrambled for the emergency button, slamming it, desperate for an alarm. A dull, pathetic bell sounded within the cabin, then silence. The air grew palpably colder. My breath hitched. I tried the floor buttons again, jabbing at them uselessly. None responded. My eyes flickered back to the mirror. The figure remained, but now occupied my space, as if we'd traded places. My own reflection was gone, usurped by his smiling, unblinking visage. My hands began to tremble violently. I swiped sweat from my brow. Another flicker, and he vanished. My familiar mirrored self returned. Then, in another strobe of light, he reappeared, directly behind me this time. I saw his grin hovering over my shoulder in the glass, yet felt absolutely nothing in the physical space behind me. I spun around, empty air, but the reflection held him, inches from my face, peering intently. A frigid point of contact materialized on my back, like ice pressed against my spine. A scream lodged itself in my throat, voiceless. The overhead light buzzed, dimmed almost to extinction, then flared weakly back. The figure's eyes locked onto mine in the mirror. In the reflection, he slowly raised a hand, placing it deliberately on my shoulder. Simultaneously, an impossible, heavy pressure clamped down on that exact spot. I recoiled, stumbling sideways, heart hammering against my ribs. My chest felt banded, air refusing to fill my lungs completely. I struck the elevator walls, desperate thuds against the metal, hoping to alert someone, anyone. I pounded on the doors. "Help!" I finally choked out, the sound swallowed by the confined space. Silence answered. The building slept. Wiping my damp palms on my trousers, I stared again at the floor indicators. Dead. Utterly dark. We were suspended, trapped between the 8th and 9th floors. The light continued its erratic pulse. A box, a prison, shared with something utterly wrong. I hammered the emergency bell again, repeatedly. I tried the intercom, lifting the small receiver. Only crackling static answered, punctuated by distant pops. "Hello?" I whispered into it. "Is anyone there?" Nothing. Then, from behind me, a low, quiet laughter began. It sounded muffled, filtered through layers of reality, yet undeniably inside the cabin. My skin crawled. I whirled around, emptiness. But the mirror held him, the man, his face closer now. He wasn't laughing in the reflection, yet the sound persisted, mocking. His eyes drew me in, sunken, dark pits devoid of life. The corners of his mouth remained upturned, but the expression twisted into something more like a sneer. Trying to create distance, my back hit the opposing wall. The cabin felt impossibly small. I stared at the sealed doors, wondering wildly if I could force them. My fingers sought purchase in the hairline gap. I pulled, muscles straining, shaking with exertion, but they wouldn't yield. My lungs burned. "Stay calm," a frantic inner voice urged. I risked another look at the mirror. The man's expression shifted. His mouth fell slightly open, revealing teeth that looked ordinary, yet his lips were unnervingly cracked. My legs trembled beneath me. I struck the doors again, the sound hollow and futile. Thoughts raced, fragmented. Escape, fresh air, a normal hallway. The lights flickered violently, and he dissolved. My own reflection snapped back into place. I stood panting, ragged breaths tearing through the silence. I brushed my hand across my shoulder, half expecting a lingering cold, but felt only the damp fabric of my shirt. My neck felt rigid. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears, and then the low laughter returned, closer this time, more intimate. The elevator shuddered, a deep groan resonating as if the very cables were shifting under immense strain. I braced myself, nearly losing my footing. The reflection warped again. The man materialized once more. He regarded me with unnerving calm, as if patiently awaiting my next move. Panic surged, hot and overwhelming. My mind blanked. In desperation, I slammed my hand across the entire button panel. The cabin lurched sickeningly. A high-pitched mechanical whine pierced the air. Then, with a final, jarring jolt, it began to ascend. Movement was agonizingly slow. Each inch gained fraught with the possibility of another halt. The overhead light ceased its frantic blinking, settling into a steady, albeit dimmer, glow. My reflection remained blessedly mine for a few seconds. Then, as we crept past the 9th floor, the shape reappeared in the mirror, fainter now, but undeniably present. The man in the tattered suit had retreated, standing against the back wall of the reflected cabin, his head tilted curiously. I tried to ignore him, focusing on the illuminated floor numbers, but a pervasive chill enveloped my entire body. 10th floor, 11th. My heart pounded against my ribs as we approached 12. Open, please open. At the 12th floor, the cabin stopped with a solid thud. The doors slid open. I practically fell out into the hallway, stumbling on the carpet runner. Whipping around, I stared back into the elevator. Inside the physical car, nothing. But the mirror showed only my reflection, standing in the hallway, where I now was. The interior of the reflected elevator was empty. The shape, the man, had vanished. I stood there, gasping for air as if I'd sprinted miles. The corridor stretched before me, blessedly normal, empty, the lighting steady and warm. I waited, expecting the doors to close, but they remained open, the light inside the cabin giving one last, weak flicker. I took a hesitant step closer, but a deep revulsion held me back. The thought of re-entering that space made me nauseous. The laughter was gone. Then, with deliberate slowness, the doors slid shut. I heard the machinery engage, the lift beginning its descent. I remained rooted in the hallway, forcing my breathing to steady. Finally, I made my way to my apartment, fumbled with the lock, secured the door, and let my bag drop heavily to the floor. My shirt clung to me, soaked in cold sweat. My hands shook so badly that setting the key down became a challenge. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face. The mirror showed only my own reflection, exhausted, wide-eyed, haunted, but mercifully unaccompanied. Deep breaths slowly calmed the frantic rhythm of my pulse. I changed into dry clothes and collapsed onto the sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling, straining to hear any unusual sound. Silence reigned. The thought of calling someone surfaced, building maintenance perhaps, but the hour was prohibitive. Calling a friend felt equally impossible. How could I articulate it? I saw a ghost in the elevator mirror, and it got stuck. The words sounded absurd even in my own head. Yet the memory of that icy pressure on my shoulder, the bone-deep chill of the cabin, remained vividly real. I resolved, then and there, to take the stairs in the morning. That elevator was off-limits. Sleep offered little respite, fragmented by dreams of silent, repeating floors and endless, empty corridors. I woke multiple times, drenched in sweat, convinced I heard that muffled laughter echoing in my bedroom, only to find silence and my own racing heart. The next day, the stairwell descent left me winded but grounded. I avoided the elevator religiously for the remainder of the week. Each homecoming involved the lung-burning climb, 12 flights of weary penance. My legs protested, a constant reminder that this avoidance couldn't last indefinitely. A notice appeared in the lobby. The elevator was undergoing inspection for electrical irregularities. Corridor gossip attributed a recent stoppage on the 8th floor to a simple power surge. I kept my experience locked away, unwilling to face the disbelief, the potential diagnoses. But the memory of that cold, dark stare in the mirror, the phantom weight of that hand, persists. Even now, with the lift supposedly repaired, declared safe, I find myself choosing the stairs more often than not. The fear lingers, that stepping inside during the quiet hours will conjure the shape once more, that I'll feel that glacial presence drawing nearer, floor by ascending floor, and hear that soft, chilling laughter just as the doors refuse to open. A subtle metallic sigh as the key yielded the lock. Elias shoved the door inward, a wave of stale air greeting him. He craved only the sweet surrender of the mattress after piloting the weary vehicle through endless asphalt ribbons. A flick of the switch bathed the room in sickly yellow light, and then a minute spark, a scintilla of wrongness refracted in the corner of the tarnished mirror. Closer, his breath hitched, ice sluiced through his veins, unmistakable, nestled like a malignant jewel. A lens. This wasn't merely a haven of last resort, it was a snare, meticulously set. Elias Thorne, purveyor of goods across state lines, a man intimately acquainted with the transient purgatory of roadside inns. He'd known the spectrum, from star-rated sanctuaries to questionable dens where sleep felt like tempting fate. Yet none of the threadbare carpets or dubious stains had ever whispered a warning as chilling as the one now echoing in the silence of the last rest. 14 hours bled together, each mile a heavier weight upon his eyelids. The neon sign for the last rest stuttered against the bruised twilight sky, a beacon promising respite, however dubious. Decrepit, yes, the paint peeling like sunburnt skin, but exhaustion is a potent negotiator, silencing fastidiousness. The man behind the counter, a gaunt figure, perhaps 50 years etched onto a face dominated by pinprick pupils that skittered away from direct contact, exhibited an unnerving curiosity. Duration of stay? Anyone expecting him? Just overnight, Elias mumbled, battling a yawn that cracked his jaw. Gone by dawn. A slow nod from the proprietor, the ghost of a smile twisting his thin lips as he slid the key across the scarred formica. Rest well, he'd offered, the inflection somehow curdling the simple phrase, sending an involuntary tremor down Elias's spine. Now, transfixed by the malevolent eye in the mirror, the manager's parting words resonated with a newly discovered, venomous frequency. His thoughts scattered like startled birds. Voyeurism, or a prelude to something infinitely darker? A ragged breath forced into his lungs. Discipline, if one, then more. He began a meticulous sweep, starting with the grimy sanctuary of the bathroom, and there, masquerading as a simple Phillips head screw securing the shower fixture, another lens. A visceral crawl prickled his skin, the ghosts of unseen audiences witnessing countless private moments. Back in the main chamber, the hunt yielded 2 more insidious watchers, one embedded within the television's remote, another staring blankly from the face of the bedside clock. Each discovery hammered another nail into the coffin of his security, the feeling of violation intensifying, the walls seeming to constrict. He collapsed onto the edge of the questionable mattress, burying his face in his hands, the cheap fabric rough against his skin. Trapped, utterly trapped. Escape was imperative, yet midnight reigned, civilization a distant memory. And the proprietor. What retribution awaited the guest who uncovered the sordid secret? Just then, a vibration against his thigh. His mobile, an unfamiliar number glowed on the screen. Enjoying the accommodations? The air turned to frost in his lungs. Before his numb fingers could formulate a response, a second message arrived. Don't bother calling for help. No one will believe you. Just relax and enjoy your stay. Raw panic, sharp and suffocating, clawed its way up his throat. Out. Now! He snatched his overnight bag, its meager contents irrelevant. His hand hovered over the doorknob, a new wave of fear washing over him. Were they waiting? He pressed his eye to the warped glass of the peephole. The parking lot swam under the jaundiced glare of sputtering lamps, seemingly deserted. A deep inhalation, then he wrenched the door open. The night's chill struck him, a physical blow after the room's oppressive stillness. He moved swiftly towards his car, keys trembling in his grasp like frantic insects. The unmistakable sound of another door creaking open shattered the silence behind him. Leaving so soon? The manager's voice, slick with amusement, arrested his motion. But the performance has barely begun. Elias turned, slow, deliberate. The proprietor stood bathed in the motel's sickly neon, flanked now by 2 hulking figures whose presence radiated brute force. All 3 wore predatory grins. Horror tightened its grip as Elias saw the tablet clutched in the manager's hand, displaying the sickening, multi-angled reality of his violated room. What is this? The words were thin, strangled. The manager's smile stretched wider, reptilian. Oh, we just want you to extend your visit. We have such prospects for you. Primal instinct flared, eclipsing reason. With a guttural cry, Elias launched his bag. It struck the manager squarely, eliciting a grunt and a backward stagger. That precious second was all he needed. He plunged into the driver's seat, hands betraying him with violent tremors as he jammed the key home. The engine exploded into life, just as meaty fingers scrabbled at his window. He slammed the gear shift into reverse, the tires protesting with a high-pitched scream as he shot backward out of the parking space. A frantic glance in the rearview mirror revealed the trio scrambling towards a waiting pickup truck. He found the highway, the needle climbing past 80, his pulse a frantic drum against his ribs. Every flicker in the mirror was a phantom pursuer. An hour dissolved in a blur of speed and terror before the initial surge of adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a residue of bone-deep exhaustion and quivering nerves. He veered off the interstate towards the reassuring blaze of a 24-hour truck stop, the light a fragile shield against the darkness he'd just escaped. Only then did a semblance of safety begin to dawn. Huddled in his car, the engine ticking cool, the events replayed, sharp and terrifying. A sickening realization bloomed. How many others hadn't been so lucky? How many souls snared in that web? With fingers still unsteady, he dialed emergency services. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, absorbing the frantic tumble of his words, assuring him officers would investigate the last rest. Yet, disconnecting the call brought no peace. The manager possessed his details: name, registration, the intimate data surrendered at check-in. The tendrils of this nightmare felt far from severed. Sleep was impossible. He spent the remaining hours of darkness locked in his car, jumping at shadows. As dawn painted the sky in bruised pastels, he located the nearest constabulary and recounted his ordeal, the words tasting like ash. The officers listened, their expressions a mixture of concern and professional doubt. Without the cameras, without corroboration, it remained his word against the silence of the motel staff. The ensuing weeks were a crucible of anxiety. Each ring of his phone, each ping of an incoming email sent jolts of adrenaline through him. He braced for the inevitable, a demand, a threat, the digital ghost of his violation appearing online. But the expected blow never landed. Silence stretched, thin and precarious. Perhaps they'd vanished, swallowed by the anonymity of the road. Perhaps the official inquiry had driven them underground. Tentatively, Elias began to breathe again, though the experience had irrevocably altered his landscape. The open road, once a symbol of freedom, now felt fraught with unseen perils. He sought different work, tethered closer to home, the thought of another anonymous motel room unbearable. Then, months later, the call came. The lead detective. They'd finally accumulated sufficient cause, breached the walls of the last rest. The reality unearthed was far more extensive, more chilling than Elias had dared imagine. A meticulously orchestrated enterprise preying on travelers for years. A digital catalogue of stolen privacy numbering in the hundreds. The manager, his hulking associates, apprehended, facing a litany of indictments. Justice, however, belated, but the scars on those violated remained. He hung up the phone, adrift in a complex sea of emotions. Profound relief at their capture, warring with a simmering rage, underscored by a persistent tremor of fear that had become his unwelcome shadow. The immediate nightmare had ended, yet its echoes promised to reverberate indefinitely. Rebuilding his sense of safety became a conscious act, fortified by therapy, by the unwavering belief of those close to him who hadn't needed tangible proof. He found a new purpose, channeling the trauma into advocacy, speaking out for stricter regulations, for the sanctity of privacy so casually breached. Even now, years removed, entering an unfamiliar room can trigger the old ritual. A scan for unnatural gleams, a sudden tightness in his chest at a misplaced reflection. In those moments, he anchors himself to the truth. He endured. He saw the trap and broke free. He spoke, and eventually, he was heard. That night unveiled a profound darkness lurking beneath the ordinary, but it also illuminated an unexpected reservoir of resilience within him. The scars, though faded, are part of his narrative now, but they are not the entire story. He is Elias Thorne, survivor. The terror forged a harder edge, a deeper caution, but also a fierce determination. If recounting the ordeal prevents even one other traveler from enduring such violation, then the telling itself becomes an act of defiance, a reclamation. The world undeniably harbors shadows, harbors those who exploit and defile. Yet it also holds fierce courage, the tenacity of those who refuse silence, and the slow, grinding gears of justice. It is towards this light, the triumph wrested from terror, the strength discovered in violation's wake, that he chooses to turn. Because ultimately, that is the enduring lesson. We are more than the sum of our fears, more resilient than the traumas inflicted upon us. Within the darkest night lies the power to endure, to reclaim, and to emerge not merely intact, but transformed. The final patron dissolved into the damp night air, leaving behind the ghost of cheap whiskey and evaporated hopes. My own sigh mingled with the lingering fumes as the rag traced weary circles on the scarred mahogany, a final ritual before locking the doors of the serpent's coil. Then a muffled thump echoed from the storeroom, a sound alien to the closing time symphony, a dull punctuation mark where silence should have been. A cold fist clenched around my pulse. Solitude, it seemed, was a fragile illusion. This night felt coiled, ready to strike. My name is Ilara. For 3 years, the pulse of this establishment had become my own rhythm, the clink of glasses and low hum of conversation, a familiar score. It wasn't aspiration, merely existence, yet a strange affection had grown for the predictable ebb and flow, the faces blurring into a constellation of lonely souls. But now, rooted behind the polished wood, ears straining against the sudden, charged silence, the vast emptiness of the bar pressed in, a stark reminder of vulnerability. The storeroom door groaned, peeling open like a reluctant wound. A shape solidified in the gloom, tall, gaunt, a stranger etched with hard lines, his face a granite mask untouched by the bar's dim warmth. His gaze found mine, sharp and unnerving, pinning me like an insect. A chill traced the path of my spine. "We're done for the night," I offered, the words thin reeds in the heavy air. A smile touched his lips, glacial, devoid of warmth. "My business isn't liquid, Ilara." Hearing my name spoken by this phantom sent a fresh tremor through me. My gaze darted to the wall phone, a lifeline just beyond reach. Could I bridge the distance? He must have read the frantic calculation in my eyes. Metal glinted, dull and menacing in the low light. A handgun emerged, held with unnerving stillness. "I wouldn't recommend haste," he murmured, his voice level, almost conversational. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. Who was this man? What anchor did he seek in this dim harbor? And how, by any god, was I to navigate away from this sudden reef? "Look," I began, striving for a composure I didn't feel. "If you need money, the till, take it all." He chuckled, a dry rasp. "Currency is irrelevant, Ilara. I'm here for knowledge. Knowledge I have reason to believe you possess." Bewilderment clouded my fear. "I don't understand. I pour drinks, wipe counters." He glided closer, his predatory stillness absolute, eyes never breaking contact. "Oh, I suspect the waters run deeper than you let on. We've observed this place, you see. We're aware of the extracurricular activities your employer favors, and we understand your role isn't limited to serving pints." Ice formed in my veins. Truth, unwelcome and sharp, pricked my consciousness. Silas, my boss, had indeed been acting strangely. Cloistered meetings behind his closed office door, unfamiliar, hard-edged faces appearing at odd hours, their presence discordant with the usual clientele. I'd dismissed it. Silas chasing solvency, perhaps. Naivete felt like a fool's luxury now. "Honestly, I know nothing," I insisted, the denial tasting like ash. "Whatever Silas is caught up in, he keeps it separate." His expression tightened, the granite hardening. Unconvincing, and I possess a singular patience that expires only when my objective is met. He gestured with the firearm towards the office door at the end of the bar. "Shall we relocate this discussion to somewhere more conducive?" Compliance was the only path open. As we traversed the length of the quiet bar, fragments clicked into place in my frantic mind. Silas's recent agitation, his hushed, urgent phone calls, the discreet parcels arriving long after closing. Never had I imagined the currents ran this deep, this dangerous. Inside the cluttered office, he forced me into Silas's worn leather chair. He stood over me, the gun a constant, unwavering presence. "Now," he resumed, "the deliveries, timetables, locations." I shook my head, the confusion genuine and profound. "Deliveries? I swear I don't know anything about shipments." His eyes narrowed. "Incorrect." The world tilted as his hand struck my face, a brutal, unexpected impact that sent me tumbling from the chair. The coppery tang of blood filled my mouth as I pushed myself upright, vision swimming. "Let's revisit the question," he growled, menace radiating from him. "The shipments. When? Where?" Tears blurred my sight, pain and terror warring within me. "Please," I whispered, the plea raw. "I truly don't know. Silas, he doesn't confide business details." He observed me for a long, unnerving moment, then let out a sigh that held no resignation, only calculation. "Perhaps motivation is required to loosen your memory." He retrieved a mobile phone, dialed, and spoke softly into it. "Escort him." My stomach plummeted. "Him? Minutes stretched into an eternity before the office door opened again. 2 more figures, rough-hewn and silent, entered, dragging a third man between them, battered, bloodied, barely recognizable. A strangled gasp escaped me as I registered the swollen, bruised features. "Silas!" My boss lifted his head, his one undamaged eye finding mine. "Ilara," he rasped, his voice thick with pain and regret. "Forgive me." The leader offered another chilling smile. "Well now, Ilara, perhaps company will stimulate recollection." What followed descended into a waking nightmare. Questions rained down about shipments, contacts, rendezvous points, information I simply didn't have. Each denial, each genuinely blank response, was met with violence directed at Silas. His choked cries were physical blows against my heart, yet the truth remained stubbornly absent from my knowledge. Through the haze of fear and the intermittent sounds of brutality, a fractured picture emerged. Silas, it seemed, had entangled himself with a rival faction, using the Serpent's Coil as a conduit for narcotics. These men were the opposition, intent on seizing control. Just as the suffocating tension reached its zenith, distant sirens began to keen, a rising metallic whine threading through the night. The leader's head jerked up, eyes narrowing to slits. "Interrupted," he clipped. "Last opportunity, Ilara. The information, or this concludes messily." My eyes flickered to Silas, a broken shape in the corner, barely conscious, then back to the unwavering barrel, the tightening knuckle. Something fractured inside me. Perhaps courage born of desperation, perhaps sheer animal instinct. I surged forward, a blur of motion he hadn't anticipated. We collided, a tangle of limbs vying for the weapon. It spat fire, the roar deafening in the cramped space. Agony, white-hot, bloomed in my side, but my grip held. We slammed against Silas's desk. Papers erupted, a heavy obsidian paperweight skittering free. My fingers closed around its cool weight. I swung, connecting hard with his temple. He folded, bonelessly, the pistol skittering across the floorboards. Trembling, I snatched it, leveling it at the remaining 2. "Stay back!" The words tore from my throat, ragged, fueled by adrenaline and the warm, spreading dampness beneath my hand. At that precise moment, the office door imploded inwards. Uniformed officers swarmed the room, voices sharp with commands. Relief, potent and dizzying, washed over me as I let the heavy gun fall. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind only the throbbing reality of pain. The ensuing hours were a disorienting montage of flashing lights, antiseptic smells, and the measured cadence of police inquiries. A regular and off-duty officer who'd left near closing had sensed something amiss, his intuition sounding the alarm. Silas would live, facing a protracted recovery and the certainty of prison. My own wound, a graze along my side, was a painful but survivable souvenir. In the weeks that followed, patching myself together physically and mentally, giving statements, attempting to reconcile the ordinary with the horrific, the sheer proximity of death lingered. The swift, brutal transformation of a mundane evening into a desperate struggle for survival left an indelible mark. The Serpent's Coil is part of my past now. Caution dictates my present choices about work, about trust. Yet sometimes, in the deepest quiet of the night, The echo of that gunshot reverberates. The phantom weight of the weapon settles in my hand, and I contemplate the hidden dangers lurking just beneath the surfaces we navigate every day. A quiet night behind the bar will never feel quite the same.